The letter was still in his back pocket when Eli Navarro dropped his bag in the dust outside the Kessler ranch, and he could feel it there like a stone, its edges worn soft from 3 weeks of being read and reread. It was from his mother, and the last line of it was the only one that mattered. "I'm proud of you for starting over, Mijo." He didn't feel like someone starting over. He felt like someone standing at the edge of something he didn't understand yet, staring up at a house with 2 front porches lit gold in the late afternoon sun, and 2 men walking toward him who looked so alike he had to blink twice to be sure he wasn't seeing double. "You must be Eli," the one on the left said, extending a hand roughened by years of rope and reins. "I'm Wyatt. This is my brother, Cole. We don't usually get help who actually shows up early," Cole added, and there was something warmer underneath the dry humor, something that made Eli's shoulders loosen just slightly for the first time all day. He hadn't expected the Kessler brothers to be twins. He hadn't expected, either, the small, quiet jolt that went through him when Cole's eyes lingered on his face half a second too long, or the way Wyatt's voice softened when he asked if Eli had eaten anything since sunrise. 22 years old, and Eli had never once let himself want anything the way he suddenly wanted to understand these 2 men, separately, and together, and he didn't yet have a name for what that meant. That evening, over stew that Cole made too spicy on purpose to see if the new guy could take it, Eli learned the shape of the ranch he'd be calling home. Their parents had passed the place down before moving to Arizona for their mother's health, and the brothers had run it together for 6 years, trading off chores like they'd been born already knowing each other's rhythms. There was an ease between them that Eli found himself watching more than he probably should, a language of glances and half-finished sentences that spoke of a bond he'd never had with anyone. He didn't tell them, that first night, about the town he'd left or the father who hadn't spoken to him since he came out 2 years earlier. He didn't tell them he'd chosen the ad for stable help 3 states away specifically because it was 3 states away. Some things had to be earned before they could be shared, and Eli had learned that the hard way. The work suited him. Mucking stalls before sunrise, mending fence line in the brutal press of noon heat, learning the particular stubbornness of a mare named Junebug who bit if you rushed her, Eli found a kind of peace in it that surprised him. What surprised him more was how quickly the days began to organize themselves around small moments, Wyatt's steady hand showing him how to check a horse's hoof for stones, patient in a way that made Eli want to get it right just to see him nod in approval. Cole's habit of tossing him a cold water bottle without being asked, always at the exact moment Eli's throat had gone dry, like he'd been watching without seeming to watch. It was Wyatt who noticed first that something in Eli went quiet whenever his phone buzzed with his mother's name and nothing else. It was Cole who noticed that Eli flinched, almost imperceptibly, at the word father when it came up in passing conversation about the ranch's history. Neither brother said anything right away. They simply began, without discussing it between themselves, to make more space for him, an extra plate at dinner without asking, a lighter workload on the mornings he looked like he hadn't slept. "You don't have to earn your place here," Wyatt told him one night, weeks in, when Eli tried to take on double chores to make up for a shift he'd missed with a fever. They were sitting on the porch steps, the sky doing its slow bruise-purple fade into night. "You already have it." Eli's chest tightened at that, the particular ache of being told something he desperately needed to hear and didn't quite know how to believe yet. "Where I'm from," he said carefully, "you had to earn everything. Especially the parts of yourself people didn't like." Wyatt didn't press. He just sat with him in the quiet, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched, and let the silence do the comforting that words couldn't. The trouble, if it could be called that, started small. Eli found himself noticing which brother he sought out when he had good news, and which one he sought out when the ache of missing his mother got too loud to carry alone. He told himself it meant nothing, that it was simply 2 different kinds of comfort from 2 different people. But there were nights he lay awake turning the truth over like a stone in his palm. He was falling, slowly and helplessly, for both of them, and he had no idea what to do with a feeling that large. He tried, for a while, to smother it. He kept his eyes down at dinner. He volunteered for the farthest fence lines, the loneliest chores, anything that put distance between himself and the 2 people who made his heart do something reckless and unfamiliar. But distance, he learned, only made the wanting louder. It was Cole who confronted him about it first, cornering him in the tack room on a rain-heavy afternoon when the smell of leather and hay hung thick in the air. "You've been avoiding us," Cole said, not unkindly, just direct in the way Cole always was. "Did we do something?" "No," Eli said, too fast, his voice catching on the word. "It's not you. He stopped. His hands had gone still on the bridle he was cleaning, and he could feel Cole watching him, waiting, patient despite himself. "It's complicated. Try me." Eli looked up, and something in Cole's face, open, unguarded, none of the teasing dryness he wore like armor most days, made the truth rise up before he could stop it. "I think about both of you," he said quietly. "All the time. And I don't know what that makes me, or what it means, or if it's even something I'm allowed to feel." The rain kept falling outside. Cole didn't say anything for a long moment, long enough that Eli's stomach dropped with the fear he'd ruined everything, the job, the home, the fragile, precious normal he'd built here. But then Cole exhaled, slow, like something in him had been holding its breath for weeks too. "Wyatt and I talked about this," Cole admitted. "About you. Neither of us knew how to bring it up without scaring you off." Eli's breath caught. "Talked about, what, exactly?" "That maybe we're both a little in over our heads," Cole said, a ghost of his usual grin returning, softer now. "And that maybe you should hear it from both of us before you disappear into the far pasture for another 2 weeks. That night, the three of them sat together on the porch long after the horses had gone quiet in the barn, and for the first time, nobody reached for easy jokes to fill the silence. Wyatt spoke first, his voice low and careful, the way he spoke to a spooked horse. "We're not asking you to choose," he said. "We wouldn't want you to. What Cole and I have, it isn't something that needs one more piece cut away to make room for you. If anything, we've wondered for a while if there was room for someone to make it whole in a different way." Eli's hands were shaking, though the night was warm. "I've never let myself want something like this," he admitted. "Where I grew up, wanting one man was already more than they could forgive me for. I don't even know what to call wanting two." "You don't have to call it anything tonight," Cole said. "You just have to tell us if it's something you want to try understanding. Slowly. However long it takes." There was a silence then, not the aching kind Eli had grown used to carrying alone, but something gentler, 3 people finally saying a true thing out loud instead of circling it in the dark. When Eli finally spoke, his voice was steadier than he expected. "I want to try," he said. "I'm scared. But I want to try." Wyatt reached over first, resting his hand lightly over Eli's, an offering rather than a claim. A moment later, Cole's hand came to rest over both of theirs, and nothing needed explaining after that. The weeks that followed didn't erase the fear so much as give it somewhere safe to live. There were awkward moments, the accidental brush of hands over morning coffee that made all 3 of them laugh instead of panic, the careful, unhurried conversations about what this could look like, built at a pace that let Eli's old wounds heal instead of reopen. His mother called one Sunday, and for the first time, Eli told her the truth about where his heart had landed. She was quiet for a long moment, and then she said, simply, "Are they good to you?" When he said yes, she said that was all she needed to hear. Eli never did hear from his father. But standing in the barn doorway one October evening, watching Wyatt teach a foal to trust a lead rope while Cole leaned against the stall calling out unhelpful commentary, Eli understood that the family he'd been afraid he'd lost forever had simply been waiting for him somewhere he hadn't thought to look. Some homes you're born into. Others you build slowly, one honest evening at a time, with people brave enough to make room for a heart still learning how to stay. By the time winter came, the porch light stayed on for 3 now instead of 2, and the quiet between them had turned from something guarded into something warm, the kind of quiet that only exists between people who've stopped being afraid of each other. Winter on the Kessler Ranch had a way of slowing everything down, and Eli found he didn't mind it. The frantic urgency of summer chores gave way to long, unhurried evenings, and for the first time in his life, he let himself sit still inside a feeling instead of running from it. But slow didn't mean simple. Loving two people at once, he was learning, meant paying attention in ways he'd never had to before, noticing who needed quiet and who needed noise, who reached for words and who reached for a hand on the shoulder instead. It was Cole who struggled first, though he didn't admit it right away. Eli noticed it in small things, a joke that landed a beat too hard, a habit of leaving the room just before Wyatt and Eli settled into one of their long, easy silences. One night in early December, Eli found him alone in the barn, running a brush over a horse that didn't need brushing. "You've been somewhere else all week," Eli said, leaning against the stall door. Cole didn't look up right away. "I keep waiting to feel like the extra piece," he admitted finally, voice rougher than usual. "Wyatt's always been the steady one. The one people trust first. I'm the one who makes things loud so nobody has to sit in the quiet too long. I don't know how to do this without feeling like I'm standing outside a window watching the two of you." Eli's chest ached at that, a familiar shape, the fear of being unwanted, dressed up in different clothes. He crossed the space between them and took the brush gently from Cole's hand. "You're not outside anything," he said. "You're the reason I laughed for the first time in months. You're the one who noticed I was drowning before I even knew I was underwater. If this is going to work, it has to work because of who you actually are, not some steadier version you think I need more." Cole's throat worked. "I've never said that out loud to anyone. Not even Wyatt." "Then let's say it to him together," Eli said. "That's what this is supposed to be, right? Nobody carrying the hard parts alone anymore." They found Wyatt exactly where they knew they would, in the kitchen, going over the ranch's books by lamplight, brow furrowed in concentration. He looked up when they came in together, reading something in their faces before either of them spoke a word. "Sit," Eli said softly, and for once, Wyatt did as he was told without a single argument. The conversation that followed wasn't easy. Wyatt admitted, haltingly, that he'd spent years being the responsible one so that Cole could be the free one, and somewhere in that arrangement he'd forgotten how to ask for anything for himself. Cole admitted his fear of being the afterthought, the noise nobody needed once the real comfort arrived. Eli listened to both of them peel back years of careful roles they'd built to survive losing their parents to distance and to illness, and he understood, with a clarity that startled him, that this wasn't just about him fitting into their lives. It was about all three of them learning how to need each other without flinching. "I don't want either of you performing a version of yourselves for my sake," Eli said, when the room had gone quiet again. "I fell for the real Wyatt, tired and careful and stubborn as a mule. I fell for the real Cole, loud and soft and scared underneath it. If I wanted easy, I would have stayed somewhere easy." Wyatt's hand found Cole's across the table, an old gesture between brothers made suddenly, gently new. "We're not used to being seen this clearly," Wyatt admitted. "Get used to it," Eli said, and for the first time all evening, all three of them laughed. Spring came slower than any of them wanted, but it came. The ranch woke up green and loud with new foals, and Eli woke up most mornings no longer startled by his own happiness, the way he had been those first uncertain months. His mother visited in April, standing in the yard with her hand pressed to her mouth as she watched her son laugh freely between two men who clearly adored him, and later, sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee, she told Eli quietly that she'd never seen him stand so unguarded in his own life. "They make room for all of you," she said. "That's rarer than people think." There were still hard days. There was a bad storm in May that took out half the east fence and left all three of them exhausted and short-tempered, snapping over nothing until Cole finally broke the tension by laughing at his own mud-covered boots, and the fight dissolved into something softer. There was an afternoon when an old family friend of the Kesslers said something careless about which one of you is really with him, and Eli watched Wyatt, usually so measured, answer with a steadiness that left no room for doubt, "Both of us. All the way. That's not up for discussion." Eli hadn't cried in front of anyone since he left home. He cried that night, quietly, gratefully, with Cole's arm around his shoulders and Wyatt's hand resting warm against his back, and neither of them asked him to explain it. They simply stayed. By the time the next winter rolled around, the porch light burned every evening for 3, steady and unremarkable now, the way a thing becomes ordinary once it's finally safe. Eli still kept his mother's letter, though the words had long since stopped feeling like the only proof he mattered. He had new proof now, in the calluses on his hands from a home he'd chosen, in 2 voices that said his name like it belonged there, in a quiet that had never once, not for a single evening, made him feel alone. Some loves announced themselves loudly. Theirs had grown the other way, patient and unhurried, built from honest conversations instead of grand gestures, and Eli thought that might be the truest kind there was, the kind that doesn't need to convince anyone of what it already knows. What a beautiful and emotional journey this was, full of patience, honesty, and the kind of connection that only grows stronger the more it's tested. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, plain and unassuming in the stack of ranch bills and seed catalogs, and Eli almost missed it entirely. It was only when he saw the return address, a small town 4 states away that he hadn't let himself think about in nearly 2 years, that his hands went still over the kitchen table. His father's handwriting. He would have known it anywhere. He didn't open it right away. He carried it out to the barn instead, tucked into his jacket pocket like something that might burn through the fabric if he wasn't careful, and he found Wyatt first, mending a bridle by the workbench light. "You don't have to read it today," Wyatt said gently, once Eli had shown him the envelope, unopened, hands trembling slightly around the edges. "Or tomorrow. Or ever, if that's what you need." "I know," Eli said. "But I think I want to. I just don't want to be alone when I do." Cole found them a few minutes later, drawn by the particular quality of silence that always told him something mattered, and the 3 of them sat together on overturned feed buckets in the lamplight while Eli finally broke the seal. The letter was short. His father had never been a man of many words, even in the years before Eli came out shattered that careful economy of language with a single sentence that cost him everything. But this letter was different. It didn't apologize, not exactly. Eli understood, reading it twice, that his father might never have the words for a real apology. But it said that his mother had shown him photographs. That he'd seen his son laughing in one of them, standing between 2 men who were clearly, unmistakably, looking at Eli like he was something precious. It said that he didn't understand it. That he might never fully understand it. But that 2 years of silence had taught him more about loss than 2 years of anger ever had, and he was tired of being the reason for an empty chair at holidays. The last line read, "I don't know how to be the father you needed. But I'd like to try being the father you have now, if you'll let me." Eli's breath left him in something between a laugh and a sob. Wyatt's hand found his shoulder, steady as always. Cole didn't say anything clever or soft to fill the silence this time, he simply moved closer, close enough that Eli could feel the warmth of him, and let the quiet hold all 3 of them. "What are you going to do?" Cole asked finally, when Eli's breathing had evened out. "I don't know yet," Eli admitted. "I want to believe him. But wanting to believe someone and trusting them again aren't the same thing. He has a lot to learn if he wants back in. Starting with understanding that this," he gestured between the 3 of them, "isn't something to be tolerated quietly. It's something to be proud of, or it's not worth him coming back for." Wyatt nodded slowly. "Then that's what you tell him." Eli wrote back 3 days later, after long evenings of talking it through with both brothers, weighing every sentence with the kind of care his father had never once shown him. He didn't promise forgiveness. He didn't promise a visit, or a phone call, or anything beyond honesty. He wrote about the ranch, about the family he'd built when his first one couldn't hold him, about Wyatt's steadiness and Cole's warmth and the home the 3 of them had made out of nothing but patience and truth. He wrote that if his father wanted to know his son again, he would have to know all of him, not a smaller, safer version edited down to fit an old idea of who Eli was supposed to be. He sent it without expecting a reply, and for a while, none came. Spring turned into summer, and the ranch filled with its usual chaos, new foals, a broken well pump, Cole's disastrous attempt at building a smoker that nearly took out half the yard, the kind of ordinary, loud, beloved life Eli had once thought was reserved for other people. The reply came in July. It was even shorter than the first letter, but it held something the first one hadn't, an honest question. Would it be alright if I came to see the ranch sometime? No promises about understanding everything right away. Just wanting to try. Eli didn't answer immediately. He sat with the letter on the porch steps one evening, Wyatt on one side and Cole on the other, the three of them watching the sun bleed orange over the western fence line the way it did most nights now, familiar and unremarkable and precious for exactly that reason. Whatever you decide, Wyatt said, we'll be right here. Even if it goes badly, Cole added. Especially if it goes badly. Eli leaned his head against Cole's shoulder, feeling Wyatt's hand settle warm over his own, and understood that this exact moment, this exact quiet, was the thing his father's letter could never take from him no matter how the visit went. He had already built the home he needed. Whatever came next with his father would be an addition to that, never a foundation for it. Tell him yes, Eli said finally. Tell him he can come see where I live. Where I'm loved. If he wants to understand it, he can start by seeing it with his own eyes. That September, a truck Eli didn't recognize pulled slowly up the long gravel drive, and Eli stood on the porch between Wyatt and Cole, not in front of them and not hidden behind them, but exactly where he belonged, beside them, unafraid for the first time in longer than he could remember, ready to let his father see the whole of the life he'd built, and trusting, finally, that it was strong enough to hold whatever came next. What a beautiful and emotional journey this was, full of forgiveness offered on honest terms, and the kind of hard-won peace that only comes from refusing to shrink yourself for anyone. The truck sat idling in the drive for a long moment before the door finally opened, and Eli felt Wyatt's hand tighten briefly around his own, a silent reminder that he wasn't standing there alone. His father stepped out slowly, older than Eli remembered, grayer at the temples, moving with the careful stiffness of a man who had spent the whole drive rehearsing words he still wasn't sure he had right. For a moment, nobody spoke. The wind moved through the yard, carrying the smell of hay and warm dust, and Eli made himself stay still instead of filling the silence the way he used to, back when keeping the peace had meant making himself smaller. You look well, his father said finally. His eyes moved, briefly, to Wyatt and Cole standing on either side of his son, and something crossed his face that wasn't quite comfort but wasn't rejection either, something more like a man doing careful, deliberate work against old instinct. All three of you do. This is Wyatt, Eli said, steady. And Cole. This is my home. His father nodded slowly, and extended his hand, first to Wyatt, then to Cole, and the handshake wasn't warm exactly, but it was honest, and Eli understood that honest was the only currency that would mean anything here. Thank you for taking care of my son, his father said, and his voice caught slightly on the word son, like it cost him something to say it without qualification for the first time in years. The visit was not, Eli would tell his mother later, a fairy tale. There were long silences at dinner that first night, moments where his father's eyes lingered too carefully on the space between Eli and Cole, old discomfort still working its way out of a man who had spent a lifetime believing certain things about the world. But there were other moments too, his father asking Wyatt real questions about the ranch, listening intently to the answers. Cole making him laugh, once, unexpectedly, over a story about a stubborn goat, and looking almost startled by his own laughter, like he'd forgotten it was possible to feel easy in this particular company. On the second evening, Eli found his father alone on the porch, looking out at the horses in the last light. He sat down beside him, the way he used to as a boy, though neither of them said anything about the years between now and then. I'm not going to pretend I understand everything, his father said eventually. I probably won't, not completely, not ever. But I watched you at dinner tonight. I haven't seen you laugh like that since you were small. I spent 2 years telling myself I was protecting something by staying away. I wasn't protecting anything. I was just losing you slower. Eli's throat tightened. You could have lost me completely, he said quietly. I need you to understand that. Not to punish you. Just so you know what almost happened. I know, his father said, and for the first time, his voice broke slightly. I know that now. They didn't hug. It wasn't that kind of moment yet, and Eli didn't force it to be more than it honestly was. But his father reached over and rested a hand briefly on his shoulder, the way he used to when Eli was young and had done something to make him proud, and it was enough. It was, Eli realized, more than enough. His father left on the fourth day, promising to call, and this time Eli let himself believe it, not because the promise guaranteed anything, but because he'd learned by now that trust wasn't built from guarantees. It was built the way the ranch itself had been built, one honest day at a time, one small kept promise stacked carefully on top of the last. That winter, the ranch settled into its familiar rhythms once more, but everything felt different for having been tested and having held. Eli's father called most Sundays, awkward at first, then steadier, asking about the horses, about Cole's ongoing feud with the smoker he refused to give up on, about Wyatt's quiet plans to expand the eastern pasture. His mother visited twice, staying longer each time, filling the kitchen with the smell of her cooking and her laughter, easy in a way that made the house feel, for the first time in a long while, entirely whole. On a clear December evening, nearly 2 years to the day since Eli had first stood in that dusty yard with a letter in his back pocket and no idea what he was walking into, the three of them sat together on the porch, watching snow begin to dust the fence line white. Cole had his arms slung easily around Eli's shoulders. Wyatt sat close on the other side, quiet and warm, his hand resting over both of theirs the way it had that very first honest night. "Any regrets?" Cole asked, only half teasing, the way he always did when he wanted a real answer wrapped in something lighter. Eli thought about the version of himself who had arrived here with nothing but a mother's letter and a father's silence, terrified of wanting too much, certain that the parts of himself he couldn't shrink down would always cost him everything. He thought about how far that fear had traveled, and how little of it remained now, sitting here between two men who had never once asked him to be smaller than he was. "None," he said, and meant it completely. "Not one." The porch light stayed on that night, the way it always did now, steady against the dark, marking the place where three people had built something patient and true out of nothing but honesty, time, and the quiet, unshakable choice to stay.
आशिक हूँ तेरा राजा बाजार का, लगता है मुझको नशा ये प्यार का। आशिक हूँ तेरा राजा बाजार का, लगता है मुझको नशा ये प्यार का। मुस्कुरा के बात करती हो, आदतें खराब करती हो, ना दिखो बेताब लगता हूँ, आशिक बेहिसाब लगता हूँ। ऐसा नशा है तेरे दीदार का, आशिक हूँ तेरा राजा बाजार का, लगता है मुझको नशा ये प्यार का। जिंदगी हसीन लगती है जब ये जालिम प्यार होता है, सांसों में सांस आती है जब तेरा दीदार होता है। नखरा है ऐसा मेरी सरकार का, आशिक हूँ तेरा राजा बाजार का, लगता है मुझको नशा ये प्यार का। नखरा इसका टॉप पर आती है टिकटॉक पर, नैनो से है नैन मिलाती, लड़कों के है दिल जलाती, पिंडी में है चर्चा इसका, नीरा जितना खर्चा इसका। मैंने बोला इसको मेट्रो में बिठाऊंगा, कैपिटल ले जाऊंगा, F7 भी घुमाऊंगा, मोनाल भी दिखाऊंगा, सेंटोरस भी ले जाऊंगा। आशिक हूँ तेरा राजा बाजार का, लगता है मुझको नशा ये प्यार का। मौसमों की बेकरारी को आजमा के जान जाओगी, हिज्र की आजमाइश में एक दिन पहचान जाओगी। कहना है मेरे दिल बेकरार का, आशिक हूँ तेरा राजा बाजार का। लगता है मुझको नशा ये प्यार का।